Good morning, everyone. My name is Ruhina Surendran, and today we're going to get into native plants that are garden worthy. We have three other speakers. Robert Hall is a California Native Plant Society volunteer. Susan Karasoff is the outreach chair for the San Francisco chapter. And Mary Beth is also a senior. So the roadmap for today is we're going to start with introductions to native plants that are used in gardens as design elements. And then Robert is going to take over and talk about California's initiatives. Susan is going to talk about San Francisco and plants that are suitable for San Francisco. And Mary Beth is going to do a live demo of a native plant garden. Who we are, I'm a landscape architect, and I've been practicing since '95. I use native plants extensively, and I want to use more native plants. I'm interested in green roofs and combining their design with the use of native plants. Robert, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm from the California Native Plant Society. I am a certified California naturalist, and I've been with the California Native Plant Society for about 8 years. And I'm excited to tell you about landscaping with native plants.
And I'm Susan Karasoff. I'm with California Native Plant Society in San Francisco. We've been planting native plants for 20 years, and I specifically plant edible and pollinator plants, and the search word for edible plants is ethnobotany.
Okay, and Mary Beth?
I have been planting native plants in my garden ever since I was a teenager. I am a restoration volunteer with San Bruno Mountain, and I have worked in their Mission Blue nursery for about 10 years.
Wow, so we have a panel of experts, and we are going to get into what makes a plant garden worthy. So far, we've used plants mostly for aesthetics, but garden worthy plants are also low maintenance, they're drought tolerant, they attract native birds and insects. They're very tough, and they weather different types of local climatic conditions. They can be edible, and they're also used for erosion control, different types of site conditions, and stormwater management. So this is one of the projects that I've recently worked on. This was in 2018, and I used several native plants, and these are, as you can see, salvia, which is a sage. It does well in both sun and shade, so used it in, kind of like a shaded close to the building as well as away from the building. It's a beautiful plant and was considered almost extinct because used as an incense stick. So now it's a protected plant. I've also used, if you could see, dwarf coyote bush as a ground cover. It's kind of covering up the ground a bit slowly. Here I've used heuchera, which is coral bells. It's a very colorful plant. It grows up to 3 feet tall with the plumes. And it the leaves are also very green. It comes in different varieties. It's drought tolerant. And in the background, you can see Ceanothus diamond heights, which does well again in sun and shade. It has different colorations, but it has a beautiful yellowish green contrast to the shrubs in the background. This is a more formal garden. Here I've used Ceanothus again as 2 types. One is for slope, against the slope. I've used it as erosion control. That is the Ceanothus Joyce Cooper, which is a low-growing ground cover. And then Julia Phelps is a taller shrub right up against the building. For more color, these plants attract bees and hummingbirds. This project was done in 2018, and I tried to use as many native plants because the owner wanted to cover the rest of the place with artificial grass. So right in the background, you can see a little bit of the artificial grass, but fortunately, she was open to using all the different, I think I used about half a dozen native plants, and they're all doing very well. And this was the most recent one. This is taken in February of this year. It's a steep site, and it has lots of different slopes. And so I used manzanita. You can see the manzanitas, smaller shrubs against this. and also these colorful grasses, coffee sedge grass. It's a reddish brown color. And toyon was used. I only recently started using toyon because I wasn't sure how large they get. Apparently they get pretty wide. And this one is a new construction project in Los Gatos. It's a green roof, which I used native plants extensively. Almost all of them are native plants, except I think the erigeron, the daisy is not. The others are all native plants. And the green roof coordinator, the construction company, he had to go through these plants and tell me which ones would be suitable for the soil, because on a green roof, the soil depth is very limited to less than 6 inches deep. So the plants have to be very compact. And the only plant that was required a little bit more, of an approval is the deer grass, which gets pretty tall. But all of them had to be on drip irrigation and drought tolerant. So these are all, as you can see, strawberry, beet strawberry, milkers, penstemon, deer grass, and one looks like a succulent, the chalk dahlia, which is, and most of them are flowering and ornamental. Now I'll hand it over to Rob, who'll go through the California Native Plant Society.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm so excited about the way you're using coyote brome. It's a powerhouse plant for biodiversity. It attracts over 100 different forms of wildlife, and it's a great plant for the fall because it blooms late in the year. So that's when wildlife really needs it. So it's a really cool thing that you're doing. So yes, I'm Bob Hall. I'm with the Yerba Buena chapter of the California Native Plant Society here in San Francisco. Are you familiar with the California Native Plant Society? We're a statewide nonprofit organization with 35 chapters and about 10,000 members, dedicated to conserving California native plants and their natural habitats, and also increasing the understanding, enjoyment, and horticultural uses of native plants. At CNPS, we strive to restore nature one garden at a time, and we believe that our built landscapes can change the world. We live in a part of the world that is incredibly special. California has more native plant species than any other state in the nation. Our landscapes can either help or harm this precious diversity we enjoy. California also has more rare plants than most states. In fact, we live in a global biodiversity hotspot. This is one more distinction that we share with a number of Mediterranean regions. To be a biodiversity hotspot, however, over 70% of the native habitat must already be lost. But we are very lucky to be in a position to promote sustainability to our homeowners, contractors, and HOA communities and boards, because we can begin to reverse this trend and at the same time make our communities more resilient and more beautiful than they are now. We just need a little bit more information and the willingness to do things differently than we've done before. Why are California native plants so important compared to many exotics that have been planted? Because native plants form the basis of ecosystems. Wild spaces alone aren't enough to support this biosphere. Today, the vast majority of land in our lower 48 states is privately owned. Here in California, around 50% of land is privately owned, but especially as development continues, we need our built landscapes to help. And when it comes to our gardens, there's no substitute for native plants in supporting life. Take insects, for example. Recently, we had noted ecologist Doug Ptolemy, author of Bringing Nature Home, speak at our 2018 conference. He shared his findings from more than 2 decades of research. His conclusion: native plants are far superior in supporting insects that feed birds and other creatures as we move along the food chain. How many species do we need? We need all of them. This is because biodiversity equals ecosystem services. We have already degraded 60% of our Earth's ecosystem services. What's more, 87.5% of all native plants and 90% of all flowering plants are pollinated by animals. Losing our pollinators is not an option. Only about 13% are pollinated by wind, so the rest of them require animals. What we're seeing here on one side is the way landscaping used to be considered, with decorative value, screens, and focal points and anchors being the primary considerations, but now we have all these other considerations. We have to add in food web value. We have to consider wildlife appreciation, soil restoration, carbon sequestration. There's so much more to consider these days than just pure on beauty. From all this we see, we need to balance our old scat landscaping criteria. We are in this together. We remind each other to make smarter landscaping decisions. We're all here to be a resource for you if you have any questions on any of these choices. Next slide is the California native plants can be adopted to fit any design style. Hardscaping, design layout, and plant selection are the most important factors when it comes to designing a specific style. With so many California native plants to choose from, it's easy to design from any aesthetic using our native plants. And if you're thinking of using an exotic plant with no ecological value, chances are there's a California native plant that can be used in its place. So we offer some slides here that show alternatives for the various forms that you might use in your landscape. There's substitutes. For instance, we can substitute crepe myrtle. We can use western redbud. You want to use Indian hawthorn? Consider using manzanita. Why? Is manzanita serves about 90 native plants, where Indian hawthorn serves about 90 native species, whereas Indian hawthorn is from another place where its predators and the beneficial insects that it uses aren't here yet. They may be here in a million years, but they're not here now. So we need to use what we have locally.
So some of these are also invasive, right? Like the Mexican feathergrass, the fountain grass.
Yes, it makes a pretty plant in the landscape, but we have alternatives that don't run wild. We've had incidents of Mexican feathergrass just going crazy and escaping into the wild, and we have to go out there and pull it in restorations because it doesn't offer too many benefits for the native animals. So we also ask that you consider local plants for the genetic reasons that the animals have evolved with them. You can go out and take a walk and you can see kind of what's growing in most places. San Francisco, we only have about 5% of our wild left, if that. So it's hard to do it here, but we can walk on San Bruno Mountain and see plants that are beautiful and that can adapt to our climate conditions. To create a balance in the landscape, diversity is key. It is important to have a mix of trees, shrubs, annuals, and perennials to invite wildlife to your garden. It is also important to plant flowers that bloom successively over the spring, summer, and fall seasons in order to provide pollen and nectar resources to the native pollinators. That's why I was impressed with the coyote brush, because that is a late season bloomer, and it's a very good source for pollinators. When you're selecting your plants for your garden, think about how you can support local pollinators and wildlife. Let's go over some local plants that can bring some ecological harmony to your landscape design. Sagebrush starts branching out at the ground, creating a thick dome shape. It kind of looks like it's brushed by the air. It really has a flowing form to it. And the leaves have a strong, spicy smell that are fun to brush against and smell.
The yarrow comes in very different colors, like there are reds and oranges, and then there's whites and yellows.
Yeah, there are some hybrids and some cultivars of the yarrow. I'm really liking the original yarrow in my yard right now because it has this glowing attribute about it. It's brightening up some shady spots. The flat top clusters of it are really good for making landing pads for bugs and butterflies too. So it's a really tough landscape plant that you can even have your dog trample on, so that's a good benefit. And the next plant is the coast silk tassel, and this plant grows to the size of a small tree, but it has so many branches it can appear like a small shrub sometimes. The leathery leaves are shiny on one side and pale on the bottom. If you get the male form, you get these really, really long dangling necklaces that are so cool to look at. And the next plant is holly leaf cherry. If you take a walk on Bayview Hill here, you can see them all over the place. You can also find them on San Bruno Mountain. And this plant is variable in that it'll get between 20 and 50 feet high, so it's something you have to consider. It has really cool wavy leaves that have spiny margins, and they smell like almonds. The local native people use this plant extensively. It has a lot of ethnobotanical stories behind it. It has a huge pit, so you're gonna have to suck the cool cherry flavor off of it, but it's a really great taste. But it's mostly pit, and birds really enjoy it though. And the next plant is coast buckwheat. It's another powerhouse for bees. It has smooth, fuzzy leaves that are mostly near the ground. It's kind of like one of those 2x2 plants. It has these little pom-poms that stand above it that are cool. And it's a host plant for the green hair streak butterfly and the aquaman blue butterfly. We have an entire corridor in San Francisco called the Green Hair Streak Corridor dedicated to that butterfly, but it's really dedicated to this plant because that's its host plant. And a great early blooming plant, blooms right around January or February, is the pink flowering currant. It's green in the spring, but it turns these really cool colors in the fall. And the berries are edible. I love the California coffee bush because it's a nice foil for all the silver native plants. It's a really dark green and it grows. Mine is about 10 by 10, but there are different forms that you can buy, like Eve Case. That's a smaller form if you need a smaller, but it's a really great background plant and the birds go crazy over it. It has tiny flowers and not really noticeable to humans, but the bees are all over it. And the next slide is Douglas iris, which can be used in both some dappled shade and a little bit of sun if you're closer to the coast. It's a beautiful plant that comes in many different colors itself too. It's just, iris is the word for the Greek goddess of the rainbow, so you can tell why it comes in so many colors. I love gum plant. Well, this gum plant blooms May to October, so it's another one of those that provide nectar when all the other blooms are becoming spent. It has a sticky, gummy substance that used to be used for chewing gum, but now it's processed to make technu that keeps poison oak away and washes away in the wild. This plant has already been discussed a bit. This is our local farm that's in San Mateo in San Francisco. It has these beautiful dancing flowers that seem like they're suspended in the air. And right now in my garden, it's the hot plant for bumblebees. They're just going crazy over it. Next slide.
Is this considered a ground cover or a shrub?
Well, they're about 1 by 2 or 2 by 2. So you can plant them in waves, just kind of like they're arrayed right here in these pots. And topic, it's landscapers themselves have saved us. They do seed pretty well though, if you want them to. Conservationists, as the New York Times headline blared last year, the insect apocalypse is here. Gardeners and landscapers have to step up and do their part to help us pull ourselves out of what is being called the sixth mass extinction. As this example shows in Florida, it's possible to do that. Pacific wax myrtle, and I planted one on the street here. I want to see how it adapts. It's supposed to be really good in wind and salt conditions. It makes these wrinkled purple berries that create a feast for birds. But it's a great hedge screen plant. If you have neighbors you want to screen out, this one can be chopped and planted close together and made into a hedge, a screen. And if you have skilled gardeners that can learn which plants are which, it would be great if you could plant California annuals and make a super bloom wherever you go. These plants will give you a couple months of beautiful sunshine in the garden and they'll resprout, they'll reseed next year. You can have lupins, gilias, and clarkias. There's tidy tips. There's just all kinds of beautiful, colorful plants. You'd have to train your gardeners not to pull them out as weeds though, because they will reseed aggressively. And next slide. I think it was a slide before that.
One?
So this one is a pretty cool topic. It's landscapers themselves have saved a species. And we can no longer leave conservation to the conservationists. As the New York Times headline blared last year, the insect apocalypse is here. Gardeners and landscapers have to step up and do their part to help us pull ourselves out of what is being called the sixth mass extinction. As this example shows in Florida, it's possible to do that. The landscapers found this plant. It's the host plant for this butterfly that was going extinct. It has a beautiful form and they just started using it and the butterfly came back and it's no longer an endangered butterfly. So if we do the right thing, we can solve some of our landscaping problems and we can also solve our huge biodiversity crisis. And the next screen is, so how do you go about finding the plants that are right for your project? Visit calscape.org. Calscape enables visitors to enter any California street address to easily see the plants that would naturally grow at their location. Plant profiles include detailed descriptions, thousands of plant photographs, sun, water, soil, and site requirements, butterfly host plant information, and nursery availability. it really is a good landscape. Someone asked today, they go, I grow orchard plants. I have 12 different orchard plants. I use a lot of water. What native plants work? And I said, what's your city? Just go city and then press high to moderate water use. And it generated this huge plant list for them. So it's a really useful resource. Next slide, please. So here's my information and California Native Plants information. If you need any help on anything, please contact us and we'll be glad to work with you. Thank you for listening.